For the benefit of the tape, I will introduce the panel, and I'm glad you all came. So at the far end, this is the DVD will be out at Christmas, by the way. Mr. Phil Mercer is at the far end. Phil Mercer is commercial director and co-founder of video supplier Universal Pixels. We spoke a few weeks ago for an article in LSI, and it emerged that Universal Pixels has some advanced views on this topic, which we will delve into momentarily. Next to Phil is Phoebe Currie, and Phoebe is sustainability and social impact. That's what it says. SLX, which is an events services market-leading company in the UK. Also a sustainability consultant for PLASA. So whatever you take away from this session, or perhaps watching it later on a laptop, Phoebe is going to become a point of contact within PLASA for anybody, any business or any individual who would like to find out more about what they can do to improve their sustainability, reduce their carbon footprint, and generally become a bit more green as the whole industry moves forward, hopefully into a new era of green awareness. Next to Phoebe is Martin Hildred, sales and marketing manager at an amplifier manufacturer in the UK called Linea Research, based in Hertfordshire. Amplification, obviously, is quite a key issue at the heart of these matters, and we're hoping that we'll get some insight into how amplifier design and deployment can help move things along. And finally, Mr. Matt Barney, we're very pleased to have you from a company called GeoPura, which is it just generators, or is it more than that, Matt?
We're in zero emission fuels as a subset, but yeah, hydrogen power units, so generation of green, clean electricity using hydrogen fuel.
GeoPura, and Matt, has the advantage of not just having to deal with our industry, but also with the real world, other businesses which are becoming more sustainable, we hope. But specifically, this summer, Matt and GeoPura provided hydrogen-powered generators for the Isle of Wight Festival. You might imagine that festivals like Glastonbury, and they should be on board with this, representatives of forward green thinking that they are. I think some of the stages of Glastonbury don't have any electricity at all. They just work on butterfly wing power or something, but they are very, very aware of this. But Isle of Wight made a big statement and used GeoPura to come up with a much more sustainable power for the whole festival, which is great. So let's start there, actually, Matt, if we may. What did they want, and what was achieved at Isle of Wight in terms of reducing the carbon footprint?
So most importantly, obviously working with our Live Nation, the partners behind Isle of Wight Festival, what they most want is power that they can rely on. So that need for critical, reliable power, whatever you're doing, whatever event you're hosting, that ultimately is what matters for the production teams, for the staff behind whatever festival or production that there may be. You need to know that power's going to be there for you. But obviously, beyond that, people want to move away from traditional forms of energy generation. So fossil fuels, predominantly diesel generators. Of course, batteries are brilliant, and batteries can get you so far, as can HVO. HVO also, obviously, a cleaner technology than using diesel. But if you want to go up the power curves, if you want to get the kind of power levels that power-hungry applications need for events and festivals, for film and TV, for all these applications that we're so used to from getting from a fossil fuel source, then really you need to be looking at a zero-emission fuel technology to do that. So above and beyond battery, what can get you there? Hydrogen, green hydrogen, is the method that we're using and deploying, and have been deploying now for the last 5 years across the UK in all sorts of different industries and sectors, but basically displacing diesel generators at scale, providing critical energy for whatever that power source might be, using green hydrogen. And that hydrogen we actually produce ourselves as well.
And the Isle of Wight obviously either responded to your suggestion or approached you to get this done. But what kind of reaction are you getting? Because you do other events as well. What's the general feeling in this industry? Do you feel you're any resistance, or do you feel it's an industry open to change? Compared with other businesses.
So actually, it's quite interesting. So deploying right across, whether we're working with the MOD, whether we're working in large-scale construction on HS2 sites here in London, or whether we're working with film and TV and festival and events. People initially, you always get the same comments: hydrogen, where explosion, but very, very quickly, once people realise that the technology is secure, most of what we're doing is technology that's been around for a very long time. Actually, we've just packaged it in a way that makes it accessible, user-friendly, and affordable for the end user. So very quickly, you discover that people you'd be surprised at this, they like breathing clean air. And festivals and events, you're never that far away from a diesel generator, no matter how hard we try and we're trying to move away. It's almost part of the scene of a festival or an event, where you can smell in the background those noxious fumes, you can smell that, and you don't even notice it. In some ways, it's even slightly nostalgic. But when that's not there, people do notice, and people love it. People like clean air. People also like reliability and using hydrogen fuel cells, so these are not reciprocating engines. You go up the reliability curve quite significantly. This is a chemical reaction, there's no moving parts. And so you don't need all that backup redundancy generation power that you'd have with diesel sets to keep your live event on your live show running. You can do it with a much, much smaller, much more streamlined system, just because of that inherent reliability, and they're really whisper quiet as well. So for all of these reasons, whatever initial cynicism there might be and concern, the biggest concern always is, will the lights stay on? Will I be able to continue with this event? When people get by that, they love it. And they say, how quickly can we take over the whole festival? Why are there any diesel generators at this site? So it's fantastic.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you talk about smaller systems, and this is one. Is it the case that only people at a certain level are going to be able to make changes and hope that it will trickle down, or are there ways of being able to apply this to much more modest productions, everyday productions, in fact?
Well, I think the first thing to do, really, to cut more or less 90% of your emissions, is to choose a sustainable power supply. So people like Octopus, who are energy suppliers, can give the cafe, the small venue, and the 2,000, 3,000 capacity venue an option to be able to cut their emissions immediately. As you go on, by 2050, there's going to be more attention leaning towards the actual manufacturing process and the components, the sustainability of the materials used. But for now, this is an immediate thing that you can do by cutting emissions by 90%.
So you don't regard it as just the domain of privileged?
Not at all. As you say, by the trickle down, once this technology is proven in the field, more and more companies will be generated and you'd be able to get hold of this technology, and therefore it will become more affordable, and more people will be able to use it.
Yeah, and I think also for the sort of smaller scale festivals and things, the first thing you have to do is try and monitor what you're doing, and that can maybe have a cost to it as well, especially when it comes to power. But at the same time, you're not going to be able to know what to do next if you don't have that available data to you. So I think obviously Coldplay, like you say, have a lot of resources. They're really leading the way, and the data that they publish or will publish will be an education for everybody. But I don't think you can apply it to what you're doing unless you actually understand exactly where are your hotspot areas of sort of emissions, or even just like energy efficiency. What could you kind of maybe get rid of next year, or switch to a different technology first before you actually then look at some of these bigger changes?
It's all about the data, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, as more and more data we get, the more we can understand it, the more we can tailor it and use it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've just returned from visiting a Dell show in Munich, and it's just got a Guinness Book of completely understand why you did that from a technical perspective, but 6,000 euros a day of generator fuel. And I don't know all the stats. That's the one that stuck with me, but there has to be a better way of doing that. Yeah, and there are things like that, and that can trickle down to something small. It can, it can trickle down to many things. But why we have to, and this is video. This is not audio or anyone else. I'm just looking at
It's exactly the
our
same for
little
the audio
part.
industry
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. How do we run things when they're in standby mode? And yes, we keep all the electronics running, so we don't have condensation and everything else from the elements, but we're not consuming full power all the way through.
Now, just briefly, were you guys like headphones? You think that would help?
It'd be amazing.
Yeah, I think.
Can't hear anything. Thank you.
As it happens, there are one or two
Wow.
spare.
Thank you so much.
There we go.
Well, I should have thought of it earlier, but so I'm not an AV professional. So, speaking of the business models then, and trickling down maybe a little bit, I do know, I've mentioned 22 Live, the company that grew largely out of bits of solo tech. They have a full-time HR who looks at Claudette, who looks after their footprint. They actually employ her to do it. And she goes in, not every day, but she sort of goes around looking at workflows and operations and various things that they need to keep an eye on. And one of the things that they're quite keen on is having business relationships with others who feel the same way. There's even a hint, more than a hint, that they would favour certain suppliers who can satisfy certain criteria over others who are perhaps less concerned, and build up a partnership which will ultimately create a network that will change the industry. It's a nice way of looking at it. So I was wondering your thoughts on, does that mean that doing this and doing the right thing can actually create a profitable business? It's not something that you have to take a hit on and lose money to start doing it by being worthy but losing money. Can it be a business that remains profitable as we go forward?
Yeah, oh, it's so weird to hear yourself. I might hear this off actually. Oh, now I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Can it
B Corp.
Okay, right. Yeah, I actually think if you're not going to start to do anything, then I think actually Mark Carney said it, if businesses don't adapt, then they're likely to sort of go out of business. And I think my experience at SLX, I've been there for 3 years now, and first of all, I was employed to work on their contract with the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. 10% of that contract was on delivering a sustainability and social value project, and I was just hired to do that. And then that's just snowballed into everything else. In order to deliver that project, we had to do our carbon footprint, we had to engage with the local community, we had to set up work experience, all these kind of things. And it's something we're being asked for in pretty much every job that we have now with clients. They're asking for us to disclose our information. They're even asking us to disclose information on our supply chain, which is what you were talking about earlier. And a lot of the sort of frameworks, because we're not large enough to have to report. We don't have any mandatory reporting requirements at the moment. They are likely to come in probably around 2027, but who knows? So we're trying to align. We undertook the B Corp certification, which, if you don't know, is a voluntary standard. It's got 5 key impact areas of workers, community, governance, environment, and customers. And it's basically a massive questionnaire, and it asks you to disclose a variety of information on what you're doing for sustainability and social impact. And I think aligning to those standards just really helps to give what you're saying weight, and people look for it. And whenever we go in for a tender, they're always asking us, oh, have you got ISO 14001? Are you a B Corp? Are you a member of such and such? And obviously I am employed full-time by SLX, but and that is an expense, obviously, to them. But part of the work I'm doing with PLASA is to provide PLASA members with some guidance and support on how to actually do those first steps yourself. And obviously there is an investment of time there, and I think the language is the hardest thing to get your head around, but once you can get your head around that and kind of follow those steps, it can be a fairly simple process, I think, but maybe I'm just being biased.
Who decides whether you can become a B Corp?
So there's an organisation that sits behind B Corp called B Lab, and they have verified assessors. So it is quite a process. So you have to fill out this huge questionnaire, submit it for a preliminary review. You have to get 80 points or more on the questionnaire before you can submit it. Most businesses, I think, score around 50 when they first attempt it. So there's a bit of work you have to do to get up to that point. Once you've scored 80, then you submit the questionnaire, they review it, and then you have an audit. And depending on how big you are, depends on if an assessor would actually come to your premises and verify everything that you're saying. Otherwise, they just ask for documentation.
But they're non-for-profit, aren't they?
Yeah, B Lab is, yeah.
Okay, fine. We were going to come on to that, but it does raise the issue of perhaps smaller businesses might find it easier in some ways to take these steps because there's less clutter in the way. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. You'll have less data to gather, and it's more tightly knit, I suppose. So things like reporting on your employee commuting, you can just ask who you're sitting next to, I suppose,
Yes.
how they get to work every day.
Did you use your bike today?
Yeah, exactly. And also it depends on what level you want to go into. If you want to go into your Scope 3 emissions, which is basically anything you can't control. So Scope 1 would be sort of fuel that you purchase for your company vehicles. Scope 2 would be any energy that you purchase to run your operations. And then everything else is in your Scope 3, including your supply chain. So anything that you buy, and that's a conversation for this industry as well, you need to report on the emissions of what you've bought. So if I buy this microphone, I need to know what's the embodied carbon within this microphone to then put into SLX's carbon footprint.
Is that easy information to get hold of, or is that a pain?
No, a lot of it doesn't exist at the moment. So
Right.
there is a database you can use that's based off SIC codes. But obviously, our industry doesn't have a SIC code.
But you better explain what that is. It sounds like something you get from the doctor.
What does it stand for?
Okay, well...
It's what when you register on Company's House, every company
Oh, it's a
has
business
SIC
question.
code.
Are any businessmen in? Answer what that is, but... Well...
I think...
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can, if I bought some textile, actually that would be in a different database. If I'm buying some lighting, then I will use the generic lighting and electronics factor.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
getting
sure,
a bit
yeah.
technical now.
Yeah.
But
That's fine.
but it's not specific. What I'm trying to say is not specific. So
No,
currently,
no. Well, this whole industry is founded on a wing and a prayer and a transit van. I'm sure you've found, Matt, it's not known for its stringent regulatory qualifications, but it's got better as generations have changed. It's a lot more business-like than it was even 20 years ago. And certainly the equipment is changing rapidly. Before we came up here, I was recounting an article I did nearly 30 years ago in ProSound News involving Oasis, who'll be back next year, as we now know. It's going to be very interesting to compare the system they got next year with what they had at Nebworth in '96, and before that, when I saw them at Leicester de Montfort Hall in '95. Honestly, it was a wall of granite-hewn turbo sound, drawing all the resources of England into it. Not a single kettle would work within 5 miles of Leicester that day, and it was horrendously loud. So our equipment, our AV and lighting equipment, has really changed, and one company that's done quite a lot about that is Martin's company, Linea Research. So Martin, I would like you to share with us some of the improvements that have been made in amplifier efficiency over the last, well, don't go back as far as Nebworth 96, but certainly latterly, what's happening in there that's going to, at the heart of power draw for gigs and tours and festivals.
Sure. So I work for a company called Linea Research who make amplification and DSP. And we were acquired by Focusrite Group in 2022, and we inherited their emissions targets. So good design is key to low emissions. And our current range of amplifiers did quite well. So well, we publish our efficiencies on our website, and there's a document called Mains, Current and Thermal Dissipation, which shows that our engineers were already striving for as much efficiency as possible. And efficiency is as much audio output using the power source provided without dissipating heat. And that's what we're all striving for. And so this methodology and design ethos is put into the next generation of amplifiers, which will be available next year. And we strive to dispense less and less heat and create a much more efficient electronic product to marry with the more modern loudspeaker designs, which are using less materials, have higher SBLs, and therefore need amplification, but they need less amplification to do their job. So that package makes for a very efficient...
Do you know if it makes much of a difference if you're using one of Matt's, green hydrogen-based generators to an old-fashioned generator?
Absolutely not.
What?
Absolutely not. Ecotricity, which is the company that Massive Attack they've been in the news recently, they've been trailblazing the battery-supplied generated power. So they've proved that it works. I mean, you guys, you've been showing the reliability of this technology, and there's GeoPura, Netherlands-based company who combined. I can't remember what the power company in America was, but they did the main stage in Lollapalooza this year. So, and that was all off batteries. So this technology is viable. It's just got to be the data's got to be harvested, and it's got to then trickle down and be used by everybody.
How do you keep the SBLs up and produce less heat?
Well, that's the antithesis of a good designing amplifier. So there's an engineer's joke, which I'm sure no one will find very funny, but a perfect amplifier is a wire. The electricity coming in is the same as it going out. By design, we are reducing the amount of heat that we expend, and therefore we can create more audio power output using less power source input.
I've been to a few engineering parties, and that was the best joke all night. Phil, we spoke recently about touring, and you came up with an idea that I actually ran past Carol Scott at Tate.
She didn't agree with it, did she?
And Carol Scott would like to have been here. She's unavailable. She does a similar job to Phoebe at Tate. Tate is the technology supplier. Goes way back to the early days of Yes. It was Andrew Tate, I think it was, who started. Michael Tate.
Yep.
Wrong Tate. That's T-A-I-T, by the way, not T-A-T. And Carol, I put it to her, Phil had this idea that perhaps we could, when a tour comes to an end, we could perhaps leave the stuff, or some of it, or part of it, where it lies, perhaps a far-flung corner of the world, and save the environment by not having to cart it all back again. Carol hated this idea because Well, actually, why did she? I can't quite remember what the main argument.
I don't think it fits with a tape rental model.
Okay.
But I think, in fairness to her, what I was talking about more is technology and the fact that to certain places that you go, often on the end of extensive world tours, they can't afford some of the technology that you use. And historically, there's always been import duties on new gear that are horrendous. And I'm thinking South America particularly, but LED screens, some of the stuff that's coming maybe to the end of its usable life, and that's a challenge for all rental companies, is where you can find second and third lives for products that have been very popular. So yeah, it was based on that. It wasn't based on anything more than, and I get the responsibility of dumping things and everything else, but it's just being creative about finding second and third lives for technology products that are perfectly good for other people in other markets.
Yeah.
I think you said that audio was ahead of the game with that.
Definitely.
Yeah, because audio systems are so expensive that they get resold into the next tier down, and one sound system can find itself all over the globe. And with the revitalization of new amplification, they can actually make that old system that could be 20, 30 years old actually viable. And especially we find India with a load of turbo sound, we find Brazil with a bunch of VDOS and JBL stuff. So it's really interesting how by default it's found itself being recyclable.
And I'm the first to hold our hand up that video is the immature of the disciplines. Without sound, you have no gig. You need lights. Occasionally, you need video. So, we're the young guys here, and we're still figuring it out. So, I think I look at audio and I admire the way that nothing really ever gets thrown away.
But I think the main reason why I think audio is ahead of the game is our technology has been quite a lot slower than lighting and video. You've been rapid with the developments.
Yep.
And therefore, our stuff's got a shelf life that yours doesn't. And that's kind of the reason why. But I think things will start to slow down, and then it will be more viable for video and lighting to be used in another tier down's worth of sectors and be absolutely fine for production.
And to have manufacturers interested in upgrading. Adding a second and a third life to things.
Yeah.
Manufacturers are great at putting stuff out of factories and, building to huge quotas and quantities, but, sometimes you've got to refurbish, you've got to upgrade, you've got to extend the life of things for people.
Alex Penn said on the same issue, Alex Penn, founder of 22 Live, said that you've got to be careful who you're dealing with if you're talking about leaving gear and selling it on.
Absolutely.
Because your reputation is on the line as well.
Yeah, it has to be responsible. Yeah. Absolutely has to be responsible.
Okay. Another discussion that I've had with people recently is about residency circuits, about the idea of gear staying in one place, being owned by the venue and kept in the venue, and the artists come and go with a lot less to carry for themselves. This also relates to the idea of a residency which draws a lot of people to one venue, like in Vegas, for example, where the artist doesn't move and the audiences have to go through a lot of carbon to get there and go home again. So what do you think about that as a model? Do you think which way around is it? Again, Carol Scott, bless her, said actually the artists should tour more, which is probably good news for Universal Pixels and 20.
Out the best way to be as sustainable as possible in both methods.
So what is the difference then between
Well, I think you've got certain artists, maybe because of their age or their families, they actually want to, and you know, Adele's a great example. She played 10 shows. She just finished last night. She did 10 shows in Munich. Munich is in the heart of Europe. You go, why Munich? But it's in the heart of Europe, and if you build it, they will come, and they did. 800,000 tickets sold. Look at ABBA as an example of a residency. That show is too technical, I think, to tour, and it's worked. So, you know, the business case would say that residencies in certain circumstances absolutely work. Look at the Sphere. You cannot possibly tour that. There is only one in the world. But then you still need bands. Bands and acts that tour are the heart of our business. And I think it's a case of what is best practice for both.
That's already happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
With smaller tiers, with lower tiers, you've got a trailer on the back of a bus with specials, or a smaller truck. And that's added to a pre-existing installation to define that show. And that's not really taken seriously as you go up through the tiers, because the individuality to stand out as a standalone production is far more difficult to achieve by integrating. It will take a lot more time to actually integrate than actually having your own system that's pre-loomed, it put in the truck in the right way, comes out, thrown up, and works first time. So there is a lot of discussion to try and take those attitudes of the smaller, lower tiers, smaller tours, and try and adapt that to large productions.
Another thing that came up with that, though, Martin, was that that sort of growth from a small act to a medium-sized act to a larger act, and keeping the same equipment or getting used to that equipment and sort of like an instrument, getting a sort of growing into it is really important.
It's down to the versatility of the installed equipment and how it can be used. So it's, if sound, video and lights equipment becomes more versatile, I think it becomes more appealing to be able to be designed, have a design thrown on top of it by a visiting production.
Well, okay, the argument was more akin to like giving a guitarist a different guitar every time they turned up. You know, he's used to playing a Strat, but no, this place has got a Les Paul. Get on with it. That's not going to help their artistic confidence. And if you regard the equipment as a creative part of the act, which you have to, the sound of the band, it does grow with the PA system.
Absolutely.
It grows with the mics, it grows with the signal processing, and to just change it. Even if, I think there was a while when Harman tried to get all of the certain, I'm sure MSG want to do it as well, get all the same equipment and all their venues. It's not the same stuff that they've been using, so it's a consideration.
As I say, as equipment becomes more versatile, I think those attitudes will soften, and specials will be overlaid on top.
Okay, wonderful. How many for time? Because I don't have a watch up here. 10 minutes. Much? 35 past. What time did we start?
10 minutes.
You have 10 minutes.
In that case, the questions from the audience. Nikki. Yeah. Okay, is there a microphone for the... yes, we can have a handheld. Thank you very much.
To it in the next 10 years, a truly sustainable event?
That's probably a question for you,
Oh,
isn't
thank
it?
you. It's a good question. I think there's a lot being done already to show us kind of what technologies we can use. Looking at Glastonbury, firstly, and also because I have worked on it as well, so I know a bit more about it. But their approach to what they're doing with power,
Were you part of the Dragonfly stage, or did you?
No, just the like overall stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't do that, but that was also with grid fairies who were on the downs. So I think, well, the biggest impact of any event is audience travel. So first of all, trying to look at how you can communicate with the audience to travel in a more sustainable way, or maybe it's looking at different ways we can hold events or something like that to do with audience travel. Then the next thing is power. I would say that connecting to the grid is kind of the most efficient thing you can do if you can get if there's enough capacity, and potentially if you can use batteries or something like that. But obviously when you're in remote locations, probably like the Isle of Wight, you can't get a good connection, so you're going to have to look at alternative fuels like green hydrogen, or potentially even running off like on-site renewables, like they're doing at Massive Attack. On the Downs, they run it off solar and wind power, those batteries that they had on site. Then the next thing is looking at food. So food is quite a hard one because obviously it's very like a personal choice, but the carbon emissions, like the data does say that if you can go vegan or vegetarian, it actually helps reduce the carbon footprint. If that's your priority, I think you need to just define your version of sustainability, because also there's go ahead. But when we calculate the carbon footprint of an event, which at the moment is the barometer for how sustainable an event is, the sort of embodied carbon within the fixtures used isn't accounted for in the end report. So there's actually no framework for a sort of agreed standardized framework for calculating the carbon footprint of an event. But at the moment, we only account for the transportation and the energy use and the travel of people using that equipment in the carbon footprint of an event. But yeah.
By 2050, it's going to be the actual materials used to make the products that are used in performances. So, yeah, I mean the group, Focusrite Group, are concentrating on that right now, and when they find sustainable solutions, and they're proven, they will then copy and paste that through their sister companies within the group where applicable. So that's the cool thing about being part of a group, is that there's a big resource to be able to investigate this, and then when they find something that works, then they can put that across all of the companies.
Wonderful.
I was just
Hello.
maybe going to add to that one. I think equipment manufacturers have to be really, really transparent about the sustainability credentials. I don't really know a good word to say there, but there needs to be a standardized metric. So designers, because ultimately they're our customers, whether they're audio, lighting or video designers, if they could make decisions based on that in the future rather than the brightness or the loudness or whatever it is, I think that would be really interesting. But maybe one of our rental companies has to kind of have a go at providing that metric for their inventory, just as a starting point.
That's actually the project we're launching on Wednesday.
There you go.
So yeah, come on Wednesday.
Yeah, there are going to be a lot more initiatives and discussions around PLASA and related. So look out for them wherever you can. And Phoebe's going to be working hard with members to promote better practices to advance the reduction of carbon footprint. So this is subject's not going to go away, put it that way. Nikki, did you have a question? We need a microphone because you're too far away.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I have only literally just come in at the back end of this conversation, and I think actually you may have just alluded to what I was going to ask, which is, could there ever be a standard protocol for carbon footprint or neutrality, to have as a base that everybody would be working towards all together at the same time, rather than different companies or groups of companies setting their own sort of template? Would that make it easier to do, and would it actually be achievable?
Yes, there is a movement. There's something called the Carbon Accounting Alliance, which is seeking to professionalise the practice of carbon accounting, because at the moment it's not, and everyone has a different interpretation. There's guidelines and there's frameworks and there's standards, and there is sort of the ISO standards that you can certify yourself to say my carbon accounting is aligned with this standard. But yeah, at the moment it's not there yet, and as Phil was saying, especially when you're a manufacturer and you're trying to calculate the embodied carbon within your products, there's product category rules for a lot of other industries, but our industry doesn't have one. And there's manufacturers who are calculating their embodied carbon based on basically like a different recipe. So it's really hard to compare a light for another light, apples and apples. So that's actually something PLASA is trying really hard to work on, and trying to be that kind of independent body that can get everyone around a table, which is what we're doing on Wednesday, to kind of say, what are the challenges? Why aren't you disclosing your information? How are you calculating it? What standards are you using? Do we need to create our own standard for the industry so that we can share this information amongst everyone? And I'd say SLX's carbon footprint is not accurate. Like for our Scope 3, it's not accurate at all, because we're taking very average factors from the SIT code database that we're using in our accounting, which isn't representative of our industry, or gives a particularly good picture of what actually the impact is.
Okay, so clearly there's work to be done, and there's going to be a lot of discussions in the future. Joe?
How far away are we from that? If we start on Wednesday, if you start on Wednesday with everybody, what sort of time frame do you think, conservatively, that you'd be looking at to have something that works for all the manufacturers in our industry?
It's a very good question, and before I came here I was tasked with the task to define all the different categories within the industry, so that's going to take me a while, I think. But there's also some regulation coming in the EU called the ESPR, European Sustainability Product. You might know about this. And there's the first forum is being held in the quarter of this year. So, I mean, who knows if we'll adopt that in the UK, but there's pressure from that end, and then there's also pressure from the sort of corporate business reporting side. We've got the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Standard in the EU, which most large companies have to report to at the moment, but SMEs will have to report to by sort of 2027, and within that we'll have to make sure that all our supply chain is involved as well, so that they're providing us with accurate information for our footprint. So timeline-wise, I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. I'm afraid we have our own timeline here. Time is up, so I'd like to thank Matt, Martin, Phil and Phoebe for coming along today. I really do appreciate it, and lots of work to be done, but we'll get there. Please thank the panel.